the best, healthiest food isn't the food that's always consumed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The food that makes you feel good is what gets consumed.
Right.
But sometimes that food that makes you feel good can be bad for you and bad for society in a whole.
And we're back with an absolute disaster of a podcast from Andy and the Toy Story Boys. Schulz and his epiphanies are getting out of control. Get this, Andrew just discovered the art of grifting. That's right, one of the biggest grifters in the podcasting universe just discovered the subtle art of grifting. And then in one of the most brilliant examples of pure irony you've ever seen, he proceeded to explain it to us without realizing that he was describing himself exactly.
And the really shrewd grifters keep on changing their grift with culture. And they're constantly adjusting. All of a sudden, they're talking about this new thing. And all of a sudden, they're talking about another thing. And all of a sudden, and they've never spoken about it before, but they're really passionate about it all of a sudden. When I see that, I'm like, oh, this motherfucker is committed to the grift. And sometimes they don't even know they are. They see themselves as heroic.
Okay, between this guy and Bert Kreischer, there is now a fierce competition for the biggest lolcow on the internet. But let's take a step back and have a look at how all of this started. On this week's episode of Flagrant, they continued the trend of no guest. 4 of their last 5 episodes have been just Andy and his boy band sitting around and smelling each other's farts. And so after they fumbled their way through the Kendrick-Drake rap beef, which I'll come back to later, they go into the topics of grifting, free speech, and politics. Now, it seems to me like there might be some frustration building due to their numbers falling off. In April last year, they hit just over 11 million views for the month, whereas this year they got just over 7 million, which is still a great number, but obviously having a 40% drop can create some anxiety, especially when you've got all your buddies on the payroll. There's a similar thing going on over at YMH Studios. In the new year, they dropped Dr. Drew's podcast, and just this week, we saw Tom and Bert making a fake apology in an attempt to bounce back from all the hate they've been getting, which is no doubt affecting their ad revenue. And there's also Brendan Business Shark Schaub, who keeps redefining the phrase rock bottom. But as for Schulz and his gang of yes men, they're trying to pitch their downfall as some sort of moral achievement.
But one thing that's really fun about, I think, our podcast is we like to indulge in the crazy conspiratorial shit, right? We have Billy Carson on, and I'll be honest, 90% of the shit he was saying is probably bullshit. Right? Like, I'm literally watching it. I'm like, there's no fucking way, but I love it. It's fun. It's interesting. I'm like watching an episode of like sci-fi. Maybe 20%, maybe 40% is real. Maybe there's some truth into it, but who fucking knows? I'm not going like, these are the facts, right? Even Graham Hancock's on, all these other guys. I'm like, tell me what this could be and let's just indulge. It's a fun little fantasy, right? And I like indulging it. But I also think that we'll have people on where we go, hey, tell us what you think of the world. And because we're interested in truth. We're interested in ideas that go against the grain for sure. But we're also interested in what we might feel is the truth. And then we take all these different ideas and we kind of balance them. And being comedians, we kind of maybe are more intrigued by something that hasn't been said. We're intrigued by like a line of thinking that isn't necessarily our own. Even if we disagree with it, we're like, ooh, no, he's kind of spitting. What the fuck is that? The Anunnaki is here? Okay, maybe there's Anunnaki. Like, we like going outside of our emotions. And if you all of a sudden jump over, because you're like, oh, I just need the views, I need to do it. We could have on a different version of Billy Carson every single week, and it would be 5 million view episode every single time. That's not what the show is. We like indulging in that, and then we want to speak to some guy running for president. Like, that's what's fun. Because we like the different ideas, and I think we curated an audience that, for the most part, also enjoys that. They like indulging in the wild shit, but then they also want to hear some truth and some real shit. It's so easy to just make money doing that. It really is, but it is a choice.
It kind of feels like Schulz is trying to convince himself that the reason their views are on the decline is because they're keeping it real, and this seems to be a trend across a lot of these kinds of podcasts. They end up having their internal production meetings on the podcast instead, and they call it good content. But if you look at their recent uploads, you can see exactly why they're discussing this now. Like I said, they seem to be finding it harder and harder to get guests on, and the episodes where it's just them don't do nearly as well. The Billy Carson episode from last week has 1.5 million views, JJ Redick got them over 1 million views, and the CIA's second biggest grifter, Andrew Bustamante, racked up almost 3 million views for them. Shout out to Mike Baker. And so if you compare that to their episodes with no guest, you can see how big big the difference is. Basically, a guest episode is worth several times more than a non-guest episode. And when you're only doing one episode per week on YouTube, it really adds up. Joe Rogan, on the other hand, punches out several episodes per week, and he has almost no staff. So for him to have a few episodes that bomb here and there, it's not as much of a problem. But instead of realizing that his operation has gotten too big and he needs to start making some cuts or putting more effort into getting better guests on there, Schulz turned the whole situation into an epiphany about grifting.
The internet is a fascinating thing. And Mark and I were discussing this, which is like, before the internet, if you wanted to grift, right, you had to figure out the grift. How do you figure out the grift? You don't know how many people are reading an article in the newspaper. Maybe you knew how many books were sold. But
you got to write a whole book.
You got to write a whole book. But even before you write the book, you got to see if this book is really being sold a lot and where is it being sold. Now, not only does the internet tell you where the grifts are, it tells you from the content you're making what you can grift on. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It's like the algorithm.
And the views are right there so you know how big the audience is.
So the algorithm pushes you in the direction of what it wants you to create, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have like some real integrity in yourself as a creative, if all you want is success, if all you want is numbers, it's very easy to just kind of follow that. And I think that's what a lot of people will end up doing.
So let's just get this straight. Andrew Schulz has one of the biggest and most successful podcasts on the planet. He's been creating content across social media for years, and he built a stand-up comedy career off the back of his viral crowd work clips, as well as his appearances on JRE. And only now, almost halfway through 2024, he finally realized that he has to actually be creative to stay relevant instead of just relying on Papa Rogan to continuously promote him through his podcast. But then he got onto grifting and comedy, and he complained about other comedians copying the formula that he used to go viral.
You even see it like in comedy, right? Like, we'll put out some stand-up clips, then we put out a special, and then we put out the crowd work stuff. And then when people saw that was popular, they're like, oh, I'm going to put out crowd work now. I'm chasing what I think the people like instead of creating the thing that you want to create.
Yeah.
And then they'll even like complain that they got to do it. And it's like, fam, go invent some shit, loser. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Don't do it.
why don't you create the next trend that people do instead of begrudgingly following the thing because you are a slave to the algorithm? Create the new algorithm, you know?
Yeah.
But the algorithm will dictate to the weak-minded creatives what they should be creating because all they want is numbers. They don't want actual, true, authentic creation. And in a way, the people that are consuming are actually manipulating the creators and not the grifters manipulating the innocent people.
Okay, hold up. So first it was the grifters' fault, then it was the fault of the comedians who are copying his formula, and now it's our fault. Oh, that's great. And speaking of comedy grifts, remember this, Schulz?
Holy shit, The Rock just reposted.
My boy changed comedy twice.
Andrew Schulz is saving comedy.
Netflix is done.
They're not done.
Done.
What are you talking
Done.
about?
They reach out to you and they're like, we want you to cut a couple jokes out.
The audience is the one that gives me the notes.
What's up, people?
That's the fun thing. You gotta do something crazy.
We got a on our back. That's why they call them wetbacks. Now, guys, everybody, we're just getting started, guys. We're just getting started, okay?
So I've covered this in detail previously in my video titled The Comedy Special Scam Nobody's Talking About, so you can go and check that out if you want the full breakdown. Basically, Andrew Schulz said he had a deal with a streamer for his comedy special titled Infamous, but then after one of the shows, they apparently told him to cut out a couple of the jokes that were deemed too offensive to show on their streaming service. He never named who the streaming service was, but there's speculation it was Amazon, but there's even been speculation that there was never any deal in the first place, and Schulz concocted a fake cancellation to promote his comedy special, which you now had to buy off his website within a 2-week window.
This is the crazy thing about it, because I understand somewhat the network wants to like take it down, and I'm grateful I was even able to buy it back. Okay, that's awesome. I put it out myself, right? And I put it out on my website, and I'm only putting it out for 2 weeks. Okay, there's a 2-week window where you can buy it. It stops, I think, August 1st or July 31st.
Why'd you decide 2 weeks, though?
urgency. I saw these amazing comics put specials up on like a platform like Netflix, and it just like, it's a fart in the wind. Like people go, oh, I'll get to it eventually. Oh, it's there forever.
There's
I'll get to
so much
it.
content.
It's so much, and there's no urgency. I wanted a pay-per-view event.
I mean, that's what I want it to be. I want it to be pay-per-view. I want it to be like a fight.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we call it pay-per-view. You'll have it forever, but like I want all of us watching it together when it comes out and tweeting about it together and talking
And we're doing the
together,
after
like-
party. So like go to theandreshulz.com.
Oh yeah, just go to the website and then there's a click and it'll take you to Moment House. And shout out to Moment House. Moment House is a company that we're working with, and also they've done other versions of like live shows. So you'll be able to watch the special. It'll exist there for 2 weeks, and then we're gonna email everybody who orders a special a private link of it, so you'll have it forever. So when you get it, you just get it forever.
Okay, yeah.
We're also talking to Moment House, and we might just keep it up there in perpetuity, so you can have that or the link. But yeah, I know it says the 2 weeks, maybe that's confusing, but you'll just have this special forever.
So then a few weeks after Schulz's pay-per-view special was released on his website, he uploaded it onto his YouTube channel for free. This has to be one of the biggest comedy grifts in recent history, but I'm not going to go over it again here. My point is, when it comes to shameless grifting, Andrew Schulz takes the cake. Only a few weeks ago, he was back on JRE again, saying how there's no censorship and comedians can basically say whatever they want now.
This is a great time for comedy, man.
Yeah.
I think it might be the best time ever.
Of
I
course.
really do. I think this is legitimately the golden age of comedy.
We're in it.
Because it's fun, because comedy's dangerous again.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, there's so many people that want to restrict what people can and can't talk about. That's unique.
I feel like the restriction is less now.
Really?
Yeah.
Right now, currently.
Like in today, I feel like we can kind of say anything.
But back to this grifting discussion, they eventually got lost so far down the rabbit hole that they started describing themselves without even realizing it.
This has never happened before. Think about that. Back in the day, in order to grift, you had to get lucky.
Yo, this is why you can't, whenever one of the truth comes out on one of these red pill guys and you're like, oh, that's the end of him. It's not the end of him because
He'll
the
find
audience,
a new grift.
Well, the audience still wants to hear that content. So they don't care if you X, Y, and Z
Exactly.
you did.
It was
and you're
never about
phony.
him.
Just keep feeding me the content I want to see.
That's the thing. It's never about the person. It's about the utility that person offers you.
Yeah.
What you need is your feelings satisfied and validated.
Yeah.
And as long as that person satisfies and validates them, then he's still useful to you.
Yeah.
A lot of times these people don't even love the grifters. They don't care about them. They just satisfy them emotionally. The second the grifters change or culture changes, they're like, oh, fuck that guy. We don't need that guy. Or fuck that girl. We don't need that girl. And the really shrewd grifters keep on changing their grift with culture. And they're constantly adjusting. All of a sudden, they're talking about this new thing. And all of a sudden, they're talking about another thing. And all of a sudden, and they've never spoken about it before, but they're really passionate about it all of a sudden. When I see that, I'm like, oh, this motherfucker is committed to the grift. And sometimes they don't even know they are. They see themselves as heroic.
Okay, that has to be the best explanation I've seen so far on what a Schulz epiphany is. He just described his own epiphanies. It's almost unbelievable. The Flagrant podcast has just become Schulz pretending to be interested in current events and giving his hot takes about everything and anything, even when he's done little to no research or simply has no idea what's going on. Take, for example, his ongoing commentary about the Kendrick-Drake beef. Here are some of the comments from this episode. Never try to break down Kendrick lyrics again. Your reading the Kendrick lyrics sounds like you're trying to do a test you didn't study for. I feel like if a diss track has radio play, it's a better diss. Mark, don't let this man ever speak on rap again. Andrew trying to break down Kendrick was like listening to nails on chalkboards. I promise you guys don't have to talk about hip-hop ever again. You'll need to stay in your lane and don't ever talk about lyrics or break them down anymore, and don't ever ask Al, as you're forgetting he's just the token on his podcast. I'm starting to see more and more of these comments on different episodes when they try to break something down they have no clue about. I remember back when Max Verstappen controversially beat Lewis Hamilton to the Formula One World Drivers' Championship in 2021, and the Flagrant crew did a breakdown of what happened and absolutely butchered it to pieces. That seems to be all these guys do now. Every episode is just clutching at whatever's trending and fumbling their way through it and giving their hot takes, which more often than not, they've just stolen from someone else. So when it comes to grifting as a podcaster or as a comedian, even as a pseudo-philosopher, Andrew Schulz takes the cake. Now, the thing that I don't understand, and I've said this before about Rogan as well, is that these guys have the money, time, and resources to get the right people on and have proper discussions about whatever they like. Instead, they get all these grifters on to give their half-baked theories on everything and anything, and then hide behind the line, "We're just asking questions," or "We're just talking, it's just a conversation." Both Schulz and Rogan have had Graham Hancock on their podcasts. Rogan had him on over a dozen times, yet all of his theories have been completely debunked by multiple scientists and historians. Same with Bart Sabrell, who recently appeared on JRE to discuss the moon landing hoax theory. All of his talking points and so-called evidence have already been thoroughly debunked. So, I'm not saying they shouldn't be on JRE or Flagrant. Rogan and Schulz can book whoever they like, but to pretend that they're just asking questions and trying to get to the bottom of something, well, it just doesn't make sense. The truth is, they know that it gets the views. Schulz just said it himself. We saw him say it. We've seen when Rogan has a real scientist on the podcast who doesn't have sensational half-baked theories, it's boring as hell. Remember Ray Kurzweil? Rogan kept goading him into his end of days theory, how AI is going to destroy humanity, it's only a matter of time, but Ray wouldn't bite, and it ended up being one of the most boring episodes of JRE we've ever seen. So I think it's fine to have these conversations for entertainment and to pass the time or whatever. I still enjoy most of them, don't get me wrong, I watch them to the end, but for Schulz to pretend that he's holding himself to a higher moral standard than all the other grifters on social media, that has to be one of the funniest things he's ever said. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Don't forget to check out my Patreon as well. I'll be uploading the Brendan Schaub lawsuit appeal update over the weekend. There's also a couple of videos there already and much more to come, so don't miss out on those. And if you're not a regular of this channel yet, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you ended up enjoying this video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.
It's crazy out here, dog. It's really wild out here.
Yeah. But it is good to have these convos because I think it is like uncharted territory for us old dudes. Like you probably grew up with this, but us old dudes that are like, we're kind of analyzing and seeing how this is working in real time. Information was very easy for us growing up.
Yeah.
What I feel now with information
Overwhelmed.
is overwhelming. When I was young, I knew everything.
Yeah.
I knew nothing. But I had the illusion of feeling like I knew everything.